Our proposal from the International Security Cooperation Council, and we're all chairs of councils, is to empower the G20 to debate and act on matters of international security. The G20 is an organization that deals with financial and economic questions. It's had no mandate at all to deal with security questions. So why would this be a good idea? At present, it's really only the United Nations, the global institution, that has legitimacy, but it's criticized because it has neither effectiveness nor speed in all circumstances. We acknowledge that much conflict resolution has an economic and financial element to it, the subject matter and core competence of the ministers gathered at the G20. And we note that the G20 combines all the key countries, including all the candidates for potential membership for the United Nations Security Council. So the issues that it would address are ones for which there isn't at present any kind of framework. Historically, when the G7 was created, uniquely to deal with financial and economic issues, even exchange rates, it didn't have any security mandate at all. But eventually, the ministers and heads of state meeting at the G7 were drawn into discussing security issues, non-proliferation, and the like. The G20 has gained legitimacy in the larger public imagination in addressing global financial economic questions, which are very sensitive issues. And we note that many security issues now are as transnational as the economic or financial issues with which the G20 normally deals. So our idea, or key insight, is that if there were a G20 consensus on certain types of security issues, that might assist concerted international action in an organized way, specifically for issues like fragile states, corruption, cyberspace security, and the like, those issues that have a financial economic element to it. Who needs to be engaged? Well, of course, all G20 states would have to be engaged and agree with this. The BRIC countries are crucial: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. These are countries that pretend to a certain status in international affairs, yet haven't yet shown the extroversion in their own diplomacy to talk about general public security goods. South Korea would be particularly important in this year, since they're hosting it in November and would need to give impetus to this G20 activity. The idea would be to involve national security advisors of all of the states who would join the finance and development ministers at the G20. The World Bank is involved, of course, with G20 meetings, and the president of the World Bank has spoken of the mission of securing development, for which you need the involvement of the national security establishment as much as the economic and financial gurus. And, Monica, you've got a fifth now. The NGOs and private sector, of course, also have to be involved, especially on issues that deal with development and cyberspace. The opportunity that exists is that people generally recognize that previous efforts at improving international security cooperation have concentrated in the United Nations Security Council or in the regional security organizations that have formal mandates for this, but still many security questions have gone without adequate answers, without a comprehensive approach, without the engagement of all the relevant powers. So this proposal does argue for the further empowerment of a trans-regional organization in which all parts of the world are represented. It recognizes the crucial link between economics, finance, and security that all the pundits and the governments talk about. The buzzword is always in conflict resolution, the comprehensive approach. That must mean finance and economics as well. And we would hope that if the G20 were to speak to these issues, that it would give more visibility to the core security issues of the day. Now, the G20, if it met in this way, could over time, for example, help to develop relevant principles or new codes of contact, guidelines that would be applicable to new areas of security. One I have in mind is cyberspace security. We have no intellectual architecture to deal with cyberspace security. What is an attack? What is a defense? What is a proportionate response? Perhaps the G20 could deal with this. Governments would need to accept the idea, the G20 governments, that national security advisors should form part of their delegations to G20 meetings and allow the consideration of some specific security issues that had an economic and financial component to it. What we would advocate for is that people who agree with this idea in the G20 countries close to their presidents and national governments should argue the case in the absence of UN Security Council reform that an interim step would be to empower the G20 to act on security issues.
Good.